Senator, first of all, thank you for joining us on WOSH.
Good morning, Bob. I hope you're well.
I hope you're well, too. I know you have a lot of people coming after you, some comments taken apparently the wrong way. We've had the national news media take these comments and twist them a bit. I want to get you to react, first of all, to what's going on. You made the statements on the Joe Pags radio show. You were talking about what happened during the January 6th Capitol riot. You want to set it up there as to what exactly you said and how this has been taken by the media and how they're running with it now?
Well, sure. First off, you have to understand this is just one more example of a long line of things that the mainstream media and Democrats have taken out of context, twisted, distorted, or just outright lied about me. And this is, I think, what I consider is a pretty innocuous comment. Also, I think, a truthful statement. I was being criticized because I said, truthfully, on January 6th, I never felt threatened, because I didn't. And people ask, well, how could you not feel threatened? Well, first of all, I never came in contact with any of the people that breached the Capitol. By the way, and I condemn those individuals. I condemn law breaking. But I wasn't exposed to it. We were sealed in their chamber. We were ushered out. I just walked calmly back to my office. I hopped on a radio call right away, and it wasn't really till we heard that Ashley Babbitt was shot, you realize, this is way more serious than a couple crazies kind of walked into the Capitol. So, again, I just never felt threatened. But I explained the reason I didn't feel threatened, because I've been to Trump rallies. I've been around Trump supporters for hours and hours and hours. I don't know personally any Trump supporter that would have done anything like that. Trump supporters respect law enforcement. They want to support them. It's the other side that wants to defund police. And so I innocently said, now, had the tables been turned and, the leftist activists, the anarchists had in other words, Trump won and we had tens of thousands of leftist anarchists, protesters, I might have been a little concerned. That's what I said. That's been blown into some kind of racial comment. They're playing the race card. I mean, I did say, now this could get me in trouble because, again, I've been attacked repeatedly for challenging the left's narrative that what happened on the Capitol was literally thousands of armed insurrectionists intent on overthrowing the government. But that's not what happened. Obviously I kind of blew a hole in that as well when I just questioned the whole point of or the description of it as being an armed insurrection. When I think of armed, I think of firearms. I'm certainly willing to admit that you can use other things as weapons. We learned that from the leftist riots during the summer, flagpoles, that kind of thing. But still, total all those people that actually assaulted police officers, it's not thousands. There are about 800 people that breached the Capitol. 40 so far have been charged with assault. Again, I condemn that. I don't condone it. I condemn all violence, all riots, okay? But anyway, so now that is being blown out of proportion, and basically they're calling me a racist. Nothing could be further from the truth. Take a look at my Joseph Project. I mean, anybody that thinks they could even show a hint of racism in what I've done or anything else is completely wrong. But that's how the left goes about it. This is Saul Alinsky technique: target your opponent and then destroy them, isolate them and destroy them. And that has been happening to me now for well over a year, as I had senior Democrats produce a false intelligence product against Chuck Grassley and myself, saying that we had accepted them disseminated Russian disinformation. Again, nothing could have been further from the truth, but the news media picks up on that. They literally print dozens and dozens of stories. When we finally are able to effectively refute it, they don't say anything. As the House manager said, the truth travels, or a lie travels halfway around the world before the truth even puts on his shoes. And they're using that exact thing. They're using that technique against me right now.
I wanted to point to a study. You apparently sent something over to ABC Radio News, and I listened back to the reporter and how she misconstrued. She claimed that you had taken the study that was done out of context, and then she misconstrued how the results came down at the same time. She admitted in the piece that 93% of BLM riots are safe, but the 7% had resulted in death, had resulted in violence, had resulted in property damage. Where she took you to task was what that number is. Now, there are thousands and thousands of BLM protests. The great majority, of course, are peaceful. But these last 7%, she tried to say it wasn't the hundreds you said it was. And I wanted to get your reaction to that. Maybe you can tell me the study that you were referring to in that conversation with ABC.
I don't have the name of the group right off the bat. This is a study published in September, and it's quoted in my Wall Street Journal piece. But out of, I think, 7,750 protests, 570. So, yeah, that's 7%. But 570 turned into riots, causing about $1.2 billion worth of damage. About 25 people lost their lives during those riots. 700 law enforcement officers were injured. That's what the left wants to ignore. Like, those are all peaceful protests. No, they weren't. Again, the majority were. The majority of people that participated in those were also protesting peacefully, exercising the First Amendment right, as was the case in D.C. But in D.C., the left and the media wants to make it sound like thousands of Trump supporters were armed insurrectionists, which is why they still have 8-foot-high fencing up, tipped with concertina wire, 2 layers of it, to reinforce that narrative that 74 million Americans that voted for Trump are potentially domestic terrorists or possible armed insurrectionists. That's the narrative that I'm pushing back on. I'm countering that. It's false, but because I'm about the only guy pushing back on it, they're isolating and targeting me, and they're coming out to destroy me. And they'll use they'll lie, they'll distort, they'll twist, they'll omit, they'll censor. That's their technique, and they've got willing accomplices in most of the mainstream media.
Senator Ron Johnson along with us. You remember I came to see you probably about 10 years ago now. And the first question I asked you, and you'd been there in Washington for only a few months. First question I asked you were you frustrated yet? Were you frustrated by the process? Here, 10 years later, you had to be frustrated by the slings and arrows you continually have delivered to you, courtesy of the media and the Democrats. You think they're trying to frustrate you to the point where there's no way you'll seek another term?
Well, that's their aim. It's going to backfire on them because this just fires me up more. But, Bob, this place is utterly frustrating. But what's different now is we've gone into a very dangerous phase of America where speech is being canceled. Where is free speech? I mean, when you start throwing out Dr. Seuss books, we have come down a very dark path. I mean, obviously, I was called the snake oil salesman Senate because I just held hearings with eminently qualified doctors actually treating COVID patients, getting infected themselves because they had the compassion to treat early treatment of COVID. And for my efforts, I was deemed the snake oil salesman of the Senate. Why? Why are people afraid of information? Science is not ever settled. We always have questions. We never know exactly, particularly if something as complex as the human body and medicine and therapies. Not every drug works on the same person the exact same way. So there's a reason they call it the practice of medicine. And so all I was trying to do is demonstrate here's how we should be practicing medicine in the midst of a pandemic where we don't have time for 3-year double-blind random controlled trials. We need to have doctors use their off-label prescription rights, and yet I was smeared, I was attacked. Why? You have to really ask yourself why, and you have to be very, very concerned. The answer is because politics is trumping everything. We politicized COVID. I think tens of thousands of people died that didn't have to because we politicized early treatment. Drugs that potentially could have been helpful, like hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin. More and more information is coming out that those things. Certainly if I got COVID again, and I had it once, I didn't have any symptoms. But anybody who'd get it, I would certainly press my doctor to explore early treatment, not just go home afraid, waiting to get sick enough to then go to the hospital, and then when it may be too late. Why are we so closed-minded today? And again, the answer is because the left has now consolidated power. They have control of the presidency, both chambers of Congress, and they never intend to give the power up. And the best way to maintain power is destroy your political opposition, and they're targeting me. This is obviously a vulnerable Senate seat in a swing state. So they think I'd probably be the target number one, and I am target number one.
Senator, you said it fires you up more. Am I to believe then that we'll see you on the ballot in 2022, or are you still waiting to make that decision?
No, Bob, I honestly have not made that decision. I don't think I have to for quite some time. Remember, when I first ran, I didn't even decide to run until the very end of April, announced in mid-May. We have turned these campaigns into this lengthy process that doesn't need to be. It's mainly there to put money in the pocket of consultants. So we spend way too much money. These campaigns are way too long. Now, the Democrats obviously are starting to campaign against me. That's why they're trying to destroy me. And what I will do is I'll continue to speak out about what I think are important issues, and I'll tell the truth. I mean, that's the only, what I promised in 2010 was two things. I'll never vote with my reelection in mind. By extension, I won't conduct myself with my reelection in mind. And secondly, I always tell you the truth. Now, I'm not perfect. Where I get something wrong, a fact or a figure, I immediately correct the record as soon as I find out. But by and large, what I try and do is I try and tell people the truth about what is actually happening on issues that are important to them, like their health, on COVID, or when I see the false narrative of the left trying to paint 74 million Americans as potential domestic terrorists or armed insurrectionists, I push back on that, and this is the what I get in return. I understand that.
Senator, I wanted to touch on a couple other things before we have to wrap up here this morning. I wanted to ask you about the situation. It is a crisis at the border. We're seeing it night after night after night. Thousands of people coming up from Central America, coming into the country. In some cases, they have tested positive for COVID-19. But given the executive orders by our president, they're allowed to pass right on through and continue on to wherever they want to infect people. We've got a major convention center in downtown Dallas now being used to house 3,000 plus immigrant children who shouldn't be here. They just came up. This is such a situation, and we have to resolve it. We're not a country without a border.
Well, right now we are. And, what's unfortunate about this, I held probably more than 36 hearings on our border security. I mean, all the information is kind of coming out now, like, the dangers of the drug cartels and the human traffickers. That was all revealed in our hearings over the last few years. Now, I've got the charts and graphs. I can point to exactly what sparked this. It was DACA. It was those memorandum that told people in Central America, we've got open borders. Come on up here, and you'll eventually become a citizen. And then a couple of different court challenges over the years sparked first of all, the humanitarian crisis, as President Obama described it in 2014, which pales in comparison to the crisis that actually developed by the spring of 2019, which President Trump solved. With the return to Mexico policy, the MPP policy, the agreements with Guatemala and Mexico, we really did dramatically reduce the flow of illegal immigration to a pretty manageable level. And then President Biden, all the candidates running for the Democrat presidency talked about open borders. They're not going to deport anybody. They're going to offer people free health care. That's a huge incentive for people to come. And so this is a crisis created by President Biden, by Vice President Harris. She was on my committee. She's aware of all this stuff. She's aware of the fact that we had in testimony the fact that a 50-year-old man bought a child for around $80 to come across the border as a family so he could exploit our laws. She knows about how human traffickers stash these immigrants in stash houses. Once they get into America, they enslave them. They beat the you-know-what out of them. They videotape it and send that down as blackmail and ransom down to Central America. She's aware of all of this. She knows exactly what the implications are. They're saying that they're trying to be more humane. They are creating policies. They're creating a situation, a crisis, that is going to guarantee inhumanity to these people.
I got to ask you, I only have a couple minutes, unfortunately, but I want to ask you about H.R. 1 and why I get calls all the time from folks saying, we need to get this out here. H.R. 1 will change the landscape for elections from now until the end of time. What are your concerns? What are the things that people should be realizing about H.R. 1 and what it does to our voting?
It will take away the constitutional right of state legislators to set the times, places, and manner of elections, that nationalize the elections. It will start quashing freedom of speech, which we cannot allow. So no, this will be a disaster. It won't pass as long as Joe Manchin maintains his promise about not eliminating the filibuster, which is why elections matter. But Bob, before you let me go here, I also have to say that today I think we're rolling out my endorsement for Judge Shelley Grogan for the 2nd District Court of Appeals. I think this is an incredibly important race. I'm fully behind her. I think most conservatives are. She's actually a judge that will apply the law, not alter it, not be a super legislator from the bench. That's what we need in terms of our judges. And Shelley Grogan is the only conservative running for this important appeals court judgeship. So I'm hoping everybody will follow my lead and vote for her in April.
All right. Senator, I appreciate the time as always. I know you have a lot of things to do. Thank you again for joining us here on the radio this morning.
Have a great day.
You bet. That is